Good afternoon. I'm David Mandy of O&M Partners. We also have Campbell McCrary on the line with us from O&M. And we want to welcome you today to the Brixton Metals Corporation's Town Hall call. And we greatly appreciate we've got people listening in from all parts of the world today. And I hope you get great information. For people that are new to these calls, O&M Partners, we're in New York. We're in the business of bringing public companies, mostly resource companies and investors together in real time. The information presented is already publicly available, but we're hoping through this broadcast to bring this information to your awareness, clarify the context, and help you make better informed and wiser investment decisions. So again, we appreciate your presentation today to give us um, a better feel for kind of what's going on in the mining industry right now, and why it's a good time to be looking at a company like Brixton. We're pleased to have um, David Erfle on the line with us. David is of the founder of the Junior Miner Junky, which is a subscription-based new weekly news. It's a newsletter, and he also um, writes a weekly column on precious metals for the news service kitco.com. David's a self-taught mining sector investor, obviously very entrepreneurial about it, and we look forward to David's discussion. David, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Everybody hear me? Everybody see me? Hello, how you doing? Thanks for joining us here.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. From the turn of the century through 2011, the price of gold increased every year, rising from around $280 to over $1,900 per ounce. It was an unprecedented run. Although the gold price ran up over 675% during this period, the HUI Gold Bug Miner Index went up over 1,800%, while many of the junior gold stocks went up even more, making small fortunes for early investors. After a record run for stocks lately, we are now seeing massive volatility, with the Dow regularly jumping over 500 points in a single day. Due to central banks' collective loose monetary policies creating an everything bubble, virtually every other sector in the marketplace has made a parabolic move higher. Meanwhile, the precious metals equity complex remains mired in what is now an 8-year bear move lower, creating the last deep value play left in the marketplace. It makes more sense to buy something cheap that no one is excited about, while people clamor for exciting but massively overvalued stocks like Tesla and Netflix. After sharply correcting its own parabolic move to over $1,900 an ounce in 2011, gold has been forming a massive base below $1,400 for nearly 6 years and has faded from interest even more so in the past few months, overshadowed by a monster stock market rally. However, the de-dollarization trend has picked up pace with global central banks' purchase of gold reaching a 50-year high in 2018. Also, with the Democrats now in control of the House, political turmoil is expected to fuel volatility into the 2020 election as the opposition does its level best to have Trump impeached. Meanwhile, the European Union is fighting for its very survival, while the ECB has destroyed the European bond market. Moreover, increased taxation, which has lowered disposable income in the Eurozone, is responsible for the riots we have witnessed outside the US with the rise of the Yellow Vest movement. The war against Trump and the ECB's monetary policies, turning the people of Europe into collateral damage, is undermining the confidence completely in government as a whole. Despite these gold-friendly geopolitical situations, investor apathy towards gold equities has reached a crescendo, and the general trend towards passive investing has led the world's gold mining companies recently announcing a series of massive mergers. The recent wave of merger activity is reminiscent of what the gold mining industry experienced in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Companies like Santa Fe, Homestake, Orion Gold, TVX, and Echo Bay all disappeared in a series of plus or minus $2 billion transactions while the price of gold languished. CEOs sought rationalization, and exploration departments of the majors hid underneath their desks for fear of being fired, which echoes the feelings of many in the space today. What followed was a rebound in gold and gold equities that changed the paradigm and rewarded long-suffering investors with an exciting decade of opportunity. New companies were born from discarded assets, like Canadian Malartic into Osisko Mining, Hale into Oceana Gold, and Macassa into Kirkland Lake Gold. There was a mad dash to build new exploration and development companies, and many were taken over as the cycle of risk-taking and reward returned. Andean Gold, Bema Gold, Palmarejo all come to mind. The industry even got creative and spawned a whole new business model called streaming, with a number of today's leading players being the result of this new method of financing. All of this to set up a buying opportunity in the mining space, even more lucrative than the one created at the turn of the century, as the HUI relative to the price of gold is even lower than where it bottomed in late 2000. Investing into a basket of early stage juniors today is much less risky than waiting until after the gold price eventually breaks out of its huge base and finally moves above $1,400 per ounce, possibly later this year. And investing into a company like Brixton Metals gives you a good chance of outsized gains before the company releases assays from its highly prospective Atlan Gold project later this year. The wholly owned 979 square kilometer Atlan Gold project is road accessible from Atlan, BC in Canada and is located near the infamous Barkerville gold camp. Brixton's land package offers large target areas for exploration in search of Barkerville style or California style mother lode gold deposits.
Hey, David, we have to stop you there, David.
Oh,
David,
okay.
you did such a wonderful introduction, but we always have the introducer not talk about the company. As you understand,
Oh,
we're
okay.
trying to. It's just the way we format. But what a wonderful introduction! You gave us a really great sense of history and context. We really appreciate it very much.
Okay. My
Now,
pleasure.
but you here for concluding remarks. You understand my drift here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Now we're going to turn to Gary Thompson, who's chairman and CEO, is in fact going to tell us about Brixton Metals. Gary, the co-founder of Brixton, he's been has 25 years in the exploration for precious and base metals. He's been involved in geothermal energy. He's been involved in oil and gas. He has several discovery credits for metals and geothermals. And he's a former project geologist for Nova Gold Resources. He worked with Newmont in Alaska and Cana Corporation. He's got quite a background, and we're really pleased to have him with us today. We're going to turn you right over to Gary.
Hear me okay?
Now we can hear you, Gary.
Perfect. So I'm just going to set this to full screen. So they're watching the screen, or are they on your, there we go.
There they are.
You can see
Yep.
full screen? Okay. All
Okay,
right,
Gary.
well, I appreciate that. And again,
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for joining in. So we're going to talk today about Brixton and with the context of our Atlan Goldfields project and a little bit about our Thorn property. I guess for the U.S. Residents, we did recently receive approval from the OTC QB markets. So we now have a new ticker in the U.S. trading under BBXF under the OTC QB. So we're happy to have that. So I'll just get right into it. Here's our safe harbor statement. So I may be making some forward-looking statements, so I need to caution listeners to that, and I urge you to have a read through this at your leisure. This presentation is posted on Brixton Metals website under April 2016 date. So our strategy is to focus on high-grade gold in the Atlan Goldfields in 2019. The goal really is to expand on the historic high-grade targets. We have a handful of targets. I think there's at least 4 targets that are basically drill ready, and we've got a handful of other targets that we're refining into drill targets, and we believe we have the potential for a significant gold discovery here in the historic Atlan Goldfields. In addition to the Atlan Goldfields budget, we do have some funds available for drilling on our Thorn project. And this year it's going to be really all about the copper at Thorn. The plan is to drill a deep hole on the Oban diatreme. We believe there's potential for a copper gold porphyry at depth based on the indications that we see around this diatreme. In addition to the Oban porphyry target, we have what looks to be a very large scale copper gold porphyry system called Chivas. We want to do a bit of work on that, and with a goal of potentially drilling the Chivas later on in the season. And then we'll be looking for partnerships on with senior companies on our other assets like Hog Heaven in Montana and Langus in Ontario. So I'd say that we have a technically strong team. We're discovery driven. If you look at the roster here, we've all got track records of success in the business. Over the last year, we have strengthened the team, both on the management side. We have Darren O'Brien, professional geologist, appointed as exploration manager, brings some 25 years experience. Formerly with Placer Dome, worked on Donlin Creek and Terrain Metals and Pure Gold mining. Also, we appointed over the last year Randall Thompson as an independent director. Randall's a common name Thompson, but no relation to me. But he brings some 30 years experience in really mine building all over the world. Most recently was active in the Red Chris deal with Newcrest that acquired a 70% interest in the Red Chris mine from Imperial Metals. So that's a recent success story in BC. A little bit on our share cap structure. 90 million shares outstanding. We came into the beginning of the year with about 3.4 million. Of that 3.4, we had a $2 million flow-through financing that we did towards the end of last year. So we have about a $2 million budget that's going to go on the ground this year, split between really Atlan and Thorn, and probably weighted more on the Atlan project. We are pretty proud of our shareholder roster. We've got a good group of names in Brixton, like Rob McEwen, Gold 2000, US Global, Eric Sprott, and Hecla and Pan American. So we're pretty proud of that. We think it speaks volumes to the assets that we have and to the team. Our stock chart, you can see at the bottom, we're 15 cents I think today. This week we're coming to our free trading stock from our December financing is open, so we expect some increased liquidity as that paper comes to market. But we think that creates an opportunity for investors as we're seeing our stock sort of bottom out here as we're coming into a drill season. And we'll talk a bit more about our drill plans here coming up. So this slide's on slide 6 is showing the portfolio that we have. So since 2015, we had really the Thorn project. We've been working on that as our flagship property. Since 2016, we've actually added 3 new assets: the Langus silver cobalt project, which are past producing high grade mines, and the Hog Heaven mine, which was a small high grade mine that we're actually slowly doing some work on. But this year, 2019, we currently do not have a budget for the Langus or Hog Heaven. 2019 for Brixton is going to be all about our Atlan high-grade gold and our Thorn copper gold porphyry targets. So why Atlan? This has been an evolving story for us. We got in here, I guess it's been a couple of years now, so 2 years and about 15 property project deals to amass what's close to 1,000 square kilometers of land. In a historic placer gold camp where there's 120 years of placer gold mining, our best guess is around 2 million ounces of gold has been recovered out of this camp. However, very limited hard rock exploration for the source of the gold. And there has been some successes. Homestake Mineral Development Company in the 80s made a discovery on the Yellow Jacket zone, and you can see some of the results here. exceptional drill results, 5.5 meters of 16 ounces per ton, 2.6 meters of 27 ounces per ton. So we know there's some high-grade mineralization in the camp, and the 4 targets that we have, they all have greater than 10-gram gold targets, and so we're obviously looking to expand on that. But one thing that is interesting is some very large nuggets came out of here. In fact, the largest gold nugget in Canada, 85-ounce nugget, was found in the Atlan camp. So it's orogenic. It's a relatively early stage project. There is a historical resource at the Yellow Jacket. It's a non-43-101 compliant resource estimate that Homestake had put together based on about, I want to say about 60 holes, 450,000 tons at 10 grams. So I think Brixton is the only company that successfully consolidated all this land, some 1,000 square kilometers. Good infrastructure, extensive road network from the town of Atlan. We have 4 drill-ready targets. The Yellow Jacket, Peak 2 LD, and Imperial. These are relatively close to the town and good road access. And then we'll be working up some additional targets. One of the things that got us, interested in this project in 2016, there was a discovery made in a different style of gold mineralization. Historically, I guess everybody thought you had to be in these ultramafics, they're calling them listwanites, as a host rock for the gold, which is where the Yellow Jacket is hosted in the Peak 2 zone. But in 2016, a new style of gold mineralization was recognized. That's argillite hosted, which is really a sediment hosted style. And you can see the nuggets here on page 9. Those came out of a sluice box in 2016. And then some of the work that was done by the BC government geologists identified cassiterite, which is a tin mineral, and thorite, mineral grains that were attached to some of the gold nuggets in the area. So we have 2 new styles of gold mineralization. There's argillite sediment hosted, structurally controlled gold mineralization. In addition to that, this intrusion-related gold mineralization that's been recognized, fairly newly recognized target. So we think this gives us more upside and better understanding of maybe what we should be looking for here in the camp, and that's what we hope to sort out over the coming years. So a little bit on just generally, I guess this is showing some of the gold targets that we have. So these turquoise-colored stars represent the 4 primary targets, vein targets that we have historical either trenching and drilling on. You can see some of the numbers, all quite significant high-grade gold numbers. And the larger yellow diamond shapes are some high-grade gold samples, but we haven't done enough work. I don't think we're quite ready to drill those targets. But these are some of the areas that we want to tighten up and do some additional work to bring into the drill target stage. So you can see a lot of the historical work was done, I will say, on the western part of the property, easier access, close to town, all that stuff. But we did some work last year on the far east part of the property, and we're pulling some pretty interesting anomalous gold values that needs to be followed up. And this is brand new work that we've done. Part of the challenge historically here in the gold camp is in these low-lying valleys, you've got fairly thick gravel cover. So it's made it difficult to find exciting new vein targets when you've got potentially upwards of 100 meters, 300 feet of gravel cover. Good luck trying to find a vein under that. So we've taken the strategy. You can see where a lot of our samples are on the higher elevations, where they have a lower, low gravel, if not no gravel cover, where we're getting close to residual, close to the source rocks. So lots of follow-up work to do, and really with a structural focus here, we know that these things are high-grade veins, are typically structurally controlled. So the focus is going to be on that geological structure controls to the mineralization. On slide 11, showing the road network, pretty extensive due to all the 120 years of placer mining, and the yellow hatched areas represent the either historical or active placer mining operations. So all those yellow areas are where they've been pulling out gold. And you have to refer to the scale bar here. It's a 10-kilometer scale bar. So you're talking 30 by 40 plus kilometer area where there's gold coming out of most of these drainages. So we think that's one hell of a gold anomaly that is not explained by a couple of high grade showings here and there. So the plan is to try and figure out where all this gold is coming from. You can see on the left some of the large nuggets that came out of this camp, as high as 85 nuggets and all the way down. You can see the scale. This is a shot of some of the gold that at one of the placer miners that I met last summer. And you can see a lot of it. It's pretty common to see the gold nuggets that still have the host rocks attached to them. And you get a lot of gold that's wiry gold or friable and or hackly nuggets. And this suggests they have a low degree of gold transport. And while some of the gold is rounded and so they've been moving around, there's a lot of gold here that is high probability of low transport, which means it's coming from basically local source. This is some of the amazing some more drill intercepts in Yellow Jacket. So we started some relogging of the old core at Yellow Jacket. We pulled some of the core out, and there's still, you can see some gold nuggets in the core. So it's free gold. When they was actually trying to extract the gold here, they did have a small test mine. In fact, we do have a permitted 200 ton a day mining permit, fully permitted to operate here. That was operated in 2009 to 2011. They did pull some gold out of here from the Yellow Jacket zone. So we have that to work on to follow up, I guess. And we've been active in working with the First Nations in the area. It's Taku River Tlingit First Nations. This is their territory. This is their backyard here. Brixton was successful in 2013 in reaching an agreement with the Taku River Tlingit First Nations on our Thorn project, which is about 125 kilometers from here. So we continue to work with them to build a respectful relationship and ongoing development here. Just a little highlight on the LD. This is an interesting target because this is one of the targets that's higher up in elevation, and we've shown, based on some historical soil sampling, all these red circles represent soil samples, gold in soil, and you can see the scale. The larger the circle, the higher the value of gold in ppb. So we did a infill soil and around the old historical workings and soil sampling. It's been quite effective here because it is higher elevation. We have less gravel cover, if not any gravel cover. So we think we can expand on this. Brixton did pull a 293 gram per ton gold sample from this LD showing, and you can see some of the other we'll call them mini bulk samples that turn some pretty significant high grade gold. And there's a couple of drill intercepts here, 3 meters of 9 grams gold at shallow depth. So there's certainly this is going to be one to watch for us. We're excited about the prospectivity here, and it looks like we can expand on this signature. So a little summary for Atlin. Brixton again is one of the first companies to consolidate 1,000 square kilometers of lands in a historic gold producing camp. Exceptional high grade gold drill intercepts to date, and we have 4 drill ready targets that we're going to be drilling, probably coming June, July, and then with additional soil sampling and prospecting and mapping that we plan to do. We'll be looking to generate additional gold targets throughout the season. One of the objectives for us would be to see if we can drill all year round here. We know this year they had quite a low to no snowpack. Given the low elevation of this camp in general, we think there's a possibility and probability of drilling basically throughout the year. So we'll have to see about that. We haven't not drilled here yet, so that's to be determined. But we're excited to get up there and do some drilling and see if we can put together some new targets and continue to drill on some of the high grade. Now we're going to move to the Thorn project. As I mentioned, most of the funds will be allocated towards Atlin, but we do want to spend maybe 25 or 30% of that $2 million budget on Thorn. This has been our flagship project. It's also a district scale It's close to 1,000 square kilometers that's wholly owned. And we're looking at what's kind of evolving to be a porphyry camp, really a district scale play. And there's obviously the Golden Triangle of Northwest BC has been getting a lot of attention over the last few years. We have very similar geology that runs up into Northwest BC, not that far from Imperial Metals Red Chris mine, which is now largely controlled by Newcrest. So the plan really here is to I guess flush out the porphyry targets. Slide 16 shows really three areas of interest for us. Oban, it's a Oban, diatreme, breccia, these Talisker and Glenfiddich zones, sort of as one area. The Outlaw Gold Zone, which is a sediment-hosted gold area that we've been working up. And most recently, this Chivas zone represents one of the largest targets we have on the property. So we continue to find new mineralization. Effectively every season we've gone up there. So we'll be looking to really focus the efforts this year on Oban and the Chivas targets. So the thinking is, well, where's all our copper really? And I think for Thorn this year is all about the copper. Slide 17 shows where we're planning to drill a deep hole, perhaps 1,000-meter hole in what we think is a deep porphyry target on the Oban diatreme breccia. And why drill it there? Well, a couple things is we know that the last drilling that was drilled on the Oban zone, hole 119 in 2013, ended in 7 meters of 0.5% copper at 383 meters depth. And the second best copper interval was in hole 85 that drilled 30 meters of 1.1% copper at 264. So it looks like we've got more precious metal rich near the top of this diatreme, but getting more base metals, more copper certainly towards the bottom of this hole. And if you look over to the right side of this this page rather, we're using this Lepento far southeast model. It holds fairly well true because we do have this unconformity in around here. We do have this diatreme breccia. And what's interesting about the far southeast is that they recognize fragments, mineralized fragments within the diatreme in the far southeast deposit, and they basically drilled down the diatreme to a point where they started intersecting porphyry, in fact, quite high-grade porphyry mineralization at significant depths. So we're using that model as a good analog here for this one of Thorn's porphyry targets at depth. So we know it's mineralized down to almost 400 meters. What we don't know is from 400 down is it going to continue to be mineralized, and can we tag into a porphyry? So that's a shoot for the fence hole. We're pretty excited about that. We've signed a drill contract. We're basically ready to drill this thing. Come early June is the target to start drilling on this. And then one of the other things that we want to do is we want to follow up some work that was done over the last few years on our Chivas zone. And this slide 18 represents the analog that we have for the Chivas zone. In fact, the work that Brock Riedel has done, which is Brock's a porphyry expert that has spent some time here kind of modeling this up. And so the Chivas target has a similar footprint to Bingham Canyon, which is a very large copper deposit in Utah. Similar geochemical signature and footprint-wise, you can see the scale bar here, quite a large footprint, and similar chemistry, where is our Oban and Talisker and perhaps Outlaw Zone may represent distal deposits to what could be a one large porphyry. Although we kind of feel that maybe there's several porphyry centers, maybe not one big one, but multiple porphyry centers on the property. Slide 19 is really just showing, really if you look at the Bingham Canyon geochemistry and using the silver-gold ratio, you see in the core of this drawing here on the left on page 19, you've got a copper moly core, you have a gold halo, and then a distal silver lead zinc mineralization around that. So we see that chemistry here at Thorn on a multi-kilometer scale, and so we're excited about that because if you look at Bingham, it's a pretty impressive more than 19 million tons of copper came out of the Bingham Canyon deposit. So this is the Chivas zone. This is the chemistry that we've done. We've collected several thousand soil samples over this Chivas area. We've got a pretty significant, you can see the scale, a 4 kilometer, almost a 4 kilometer by a kilometer wide or more. We're calling it about a 5 square kilometer of copper gold in soil anomaly. It's a pretty significant anomaly that hasn't really been drill tested. If you look at the copper zinc ratios, it stands out pretty well to be a little more centralized around the copper, and we think that this copper zinc ratio helps to distinguish the porphyry style mineralization to the epithermal style mineralization. So we see both here. We see that a lot of the veins we see on the peripheral to this have this epithermal style mineralization, and so we think we're starting to hone in on the primary porphyry target. We did some drilling here in 2017 on slide 21, and largely it was focused on the gold numbers. If you look back at the gold geochem, we've got a greater than 3 kilometers of gold in soil anomaly. So a lot of the drilling was focused in around that. You can see some of the hits here. We did drill some of these high-level epithermal style veins and breccia zones. And now we can see the results of that and some of the work that we've done with the MDRU guys and Brock Riddell. We're starting to recognize in some of the holes that we did drill, we're seeing porphyry style mineralization. So in the bottom of hole 142 and also in hole 149, we're seeing porphyry style veining. And in fact, 149 was increasing copper near the bottom of the hole, 39 meters of 0.1 copper. So we feel that we're on the margins of the central part of the copper target, and some of the drilling indicates that with with the epithermal signature overprint here, if you will. So I think the good news is it looks like the porphyry copper target is preserved, and in fact it's probably relatively deep there. But good, we have some good copper numbers at surface, and we think we're starting to, with a bit more work on this target, we'll be ready to drill it. So it is a district scale opportunity. It's Bingham-like zoning, multiple precious metal and base metal targets on the property. We think that the central porphyry at Chivas is a primary target that's yet to be drilled, and the possibilities of additional buried porphyries like the Oban zone and the Glenfiddich zone, which are more high sulfidation veins that suggest, as we drill down the diatreme and high sulfidation veins, that we should start to see more porphyry-like mineralization.
Like to get to questions, Gary, when you have a chance, okay?
Sure, I'm just about done wrapping up.
Okay,
so
great.
Really the next step for us is really drilling. So the drill should start turning in June. So, depending on how long we can get that through, we should expect to see some results to market by July. For the Atlan area, it's really focused on those structural control for the gold deposition. Obviously drill the copper gold porphyry targets at Thorn. And then we'll be looking to JV or monetize some of our other assets like Hog Heaven and Langus. So just in summary, we think we have a great portfolio with high impact exploration targets. We have a strong shareholder base with management invested and skin in the game. We're a discovery focused team, and we have a budget to go drill some holes. So with that, I'll turn it open for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Great presentation. We're going to start with Heinz Thoma. Heinz, do you have any questions for Gary today?
Good presentation, Gary. With your money you have, the budget, 2 million, and you had about 3.4 to start the year with. Are you financed enough, or you need to raise more money?
Well, I mean, a junior mining company, I don't know if there's any exists that are financed enough necessarily, but we're in decent shape to get through this first phase of drilling, and I think we'll see where that takes us. The hope is obviously we get some traction on these results and go back to the market at better prices.
Do you see realistic chances to get the JV underway with the other projects you're looking for partners?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that we've got we've got a number of CAs signed and a number of groups in the data rooms. We know, generally speaking, look across the market, a lot of companies are shopping for assets. Almost everybody's optimizing their portfolios. So certainly the majors are looking for new assets. And we think we have some. Look, I mean, we would potentially take a partner on any one of these things. We're not necessarily married to any one of them. We certainly have a portfolio that we think we offer some, good assets. And I guess for the right deal with the right partner, would certainly, look to try and doing that. So I think, yeah, we have a good shot. I guess the good thing for us is that we own these assets 100%. We have low to no holding costs in some cases on them. So we're not in a desperate situation. So I think as the market improves, I think our chances will increase as the market improves for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heinz. We'll turn to John Hummel. John, questions today?
John, you're muted at your end, so if you want to ask a question.
We'll turn to Martin DeBovis and come back to John. Martin, anything today?
Martin's headset is not operable, so he'll text.
Okay, we'll go to Peter Bell. Peter?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Hey, Peter.
Thanks. I posted a question on Twitter. In the grand scheme of gold systems, how does Atlin relate to Thorn? Maybe, please and thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure. Well, we see Thorn as more of a porphyry epithermal style system. There's strong evidence for porphyry style mineralization. These are, I guess, large scale bulk tonnage type targets. And even the sediment hosted zone at the outlaw zone looks like a large scale disseminated. While we do have some high grade veins on the property for silver gold, they're more high sulfidation veins or porphyry related base metal and precious metal veins. The mineralization style at Atlin seems to be more orogenic in nature, high grade, fairly clean, fairly simple chemistry. And I mentioned there's different styles, but the high grade veins, when they were mining some of these veins at the Yellow Jacket, they were just using water and gravity to separate them. So different style of mineralization. I'll say veins and orogenic veins, there is some potential for intrusion related mineralization, I guess similar to what Victoria Gold is mining now in the Yukon. We do see some evidence for sheeted veins. And if you look at the chemistry of the Surprise Lake batholith, it's more, minerals like tin and tungsten, signature minerals and molybdenum as well. So those are more lithophile chemistry wise, more intrusion related, orogenic, different style of mineralization.
Thanks for
Hello.
your question. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your question.
I'd ask
John
one more.
Hummel? Oh, you have another one, Peter? Okay, sure.
The soil's great work. Plans for more of that, and do you do MMI or any drone-based geophysics or other biogeochem or any stuff like that? Thank you very much.
We're certainly looking at all those. In fact, we did some biogeochem over the LD because we know that conventional soils is actually one area where conventional soils are working. So we did a biogeochem survey, and I would say on average it works fairly well. That's some mixed results in the biogeochem. So we're certainly looking at whether we can make that work in other parts of the property. We're certainly looking at open to sort of all creative ways, MMI potentially. There has been others that have used MMI in the area where we've got thick gravel cover. Drones, haven't seen much in the way of drones as far as, you can do some work with drones, but we haven't seen as much of a push as you'd think that we could start to make more use of that technology. It's slow to get there. I think just the size and the weight of some of these instruments, it's hard for these drones to really be effective at this scale of the property. We are, though, actively flying an airborne mag survey at 50-meter line spacing that will help us. When we first got into this area, we did a survey, but we didn't have all the land we have now, so we expanded on that survey. So that's going to help us hopefully defining some of these structural corridors that we're looking at. And we're certainly looking at ways that we could potentially see through some thick gravel cover, and don't have a definitive answer on that yet, but that's something that we're looking at.
Thank you, Peter. We'll turn to Chesley Morton. Chesley?
Thank you, David. Did you say that there were some active placer miners in the area of Atlin?
Yeah, there's not some, there's a lot. Actually, I don't know exactly how many, but anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen maybe active placers. There's certainly a handful of we'll say large scale placer miners, and I met one of them, one of the larger ones last year, that had a $5 million season in just placer mining. And what's interesting is where they get the best pay in their gravel is right above bedrock, right in the bottom of the creek. They call them gutters. It's basically right in the bottom of these structures. And in some cases, what they do is they get a metal detector out and they scour the bottom of the pits, and there've been some high-grade veins found that way. And I'm guessing that's how the Yellow Jacket deposit was found, is they were basically mining the placer gold, and they got down to the bottom of the pits and onto bedrock, and they were still getting into gold, and of course Homestake was in there, and they started drilling it.
Okay,
so
are there any
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if there were any active miners in there that were doing milling from material higher up, and if so, if with your small mining permit that you could perhaps economically explore while producing a bit of income.
Well, there's two different titles. There's mineral titles, which is what we control, the hard rock mineral titles, and then there's placer claim titles. Those are two separate tenure in British Columbia, and so we do not own placer rights. We could certainly go start and buying them up, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about milling of the hard rock material. And if you could explore that with your small mining permit.
Yeah, and that's something we're I guess looking at, and I've had numerous discussions about that. And that's this is really our first, I'm going to say, significant exploration season here. So we're not going to rush into building a mine here. We want to do it systematically and take our time and do it right, I guess, if you will. But we're certainly looking at that, and have had some discussions around that. Can we get a small? I mean, we do have a 200-ton a day mill up and a permitted mine that we could potentially fire up, I guess. So we'll take a look at that and bring in some talents that can help help guide us on that.
Gotcha. So there is at least the remote possibility of some sort of bootstrap approach to this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's certainly worth looking at, high-grade gold near surface if you can, I guess, convince yourself that you've got enough material to justify the money in firing up the mill and all that stuff. Absolutely.
Right. Well, it's finding its way. Yeah, it's finding its way down into the valley there for the placer miners from probably right where you're looking, I suppose. And that's, again, I think, didn't you indicate that's essentially how they probably found the property to begin with, where they went up the slopes looking for the source?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So we're going to continue to work these targets up to a point. However we can do it. Obviously, we need to build some rapport with the placer miners because they have a different objective, and you know, from our experience, they don't normally like to have our geologists running around in the bottom of their pits. So we're trying to build some rapport with these guys. Hopefully we can, you know, build that relationship where if they find something in the bottom of the pits, we can come and have a look at it before they fill it in.
It's an interesting project. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chesley.
John Hummel sent a question. He sent me a question, David. So
Yeah.
apologizes. His headphones also wonky today. Do all of the corporate and large investors come as monetary investors, or did the company acquire properties for stock?
Yes, both. So Pan American was a property deal for 100% of the Hog Heaven project in Montana. We issued 2.68 million shares to Pan American Silver. Hecla was a corporate investment, and the African Queen property, which was a good chunk of the Atlan ground. Well, I guess we got about 1,000 square kilometers, so we acquired about 250 square kilometers from African Queen, which is now Desert Mountain Energy. So that was a 4.3 million share deal to acquire 100% of those lands that they held, which included the Yellow Jacket and Peak 2 showings or workings.
Victor Zhao asks, do you need helicopter support for the drilling?
In Atlan, we currently do not. We have significant road access, so we think our drilling costs in Atlan will be relatively low. And we are utilizing a track-mounted drill that's, I guess, partially self-sustained that will also reduce our footprint and potentially cost. However, on Thorn, it is a helicopter-supported, air-supported program. But in Atlan, infrastructure looks great.
Another question: do you have magnetic survey cover for Atlan and Thor?
So as I mentioned, we are currently flying magnetics airborne survey at 50-meter spacing. I think it's about 2,000 line kilometers. We did a survey back in 2017 when we first got into this area, and now we're just adding on to that because we didn't have, in 2017, it took us about 2018 to get the African Queen land. So now that we have consolidated it, we're doing an add-on survey. Thorn, we do have a pretty good size airborne survey for most of the active area that we're working. Now we're getting into Chivas, which is a newer area for us. We could probably add on a little bit more survey over Thorn, but I think we have most of the data there.
In the marketing, some people, 2 or 3 people at least mentioned some similarities to Barkerville's properties. So to what extent can you comment on that similarity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably the biggest similarity was really that it's in Barkerville. That's the largest placer gold camp in Canada. In fact, Atlan is number 2 on the list. They've been mining gold out of Barkerville for 160 years, and only 120 in Atlan for whatever reason. So there's been more work in Barkerville. I think they produced something like 3.4 million ounces of placer gold and 1.2 million ounces of hard rock underground gold. And now you've got, obviously, Osisko in there that really was successful in cracking the code, if you will. But I think, the similarities, it's orogenic gold, high-grade gold in a historic placer gold camp. They just have had a lot more work on it. Similar in a couple of ways, I guess. One would be that we're both sitting on these tectonic suture zones. These are major regional tectonic structural breaks, contacts where you've got, potentially large amounts of fluid flow to come up along these margins. So we're, I'd say we're earlier days in our understanding of the Atlan camp. And, Osisko went in there with $40 million to figure out the Barkerville camp, and they, turned the drills in a different orientation and now have these 6-kilometer long vein corridors So again, we're not expecting to crack the code, solve the puzzle on Atlan on a couple $1 million, but we think with some success here, we can continue to show promise and advance this thing along.
What do you find is the temperature of the climate for mining in BC these days? So many developments, very recent, especially.
Yeah, I mean, look at BC is it's actually a bit of a hotbed right now. There's been some great success stories. West Haven went from 10 or 11 cents to $1 something last year on their new gold discovery. You've got some great stories coming out of the Golden Triangle. Lots of success happening. GT Gold. Having Newcrest take a step into British Columbia on large-scale underground block cave mining at Red Chris, $800 million investment into Imperial's Red Chris mine. So we're seeing a lot of activity. A lot of majors are kicking tires in BC, and we think it's a good place to be. It's a good, stable jurisdiction, and we're starting to see a lot more activity here, I'd say, than we've seen in past years.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to turn back to David Erfle, who gave us the most wonderful introduction to mining. And we're going to, David, do you have any questions today for Gary?
Yeah. Hi, Gary. I was wondering about the drill program at Thorn. You said you're going to drill one hole 1,000 meters. What is that going to cost you?
It's going to be probably a $400,000 hole.
Wow. Now, what are you expecting to come up with that hole? What kind of situation are you hoping to find?
Well, what we're hoping to find is that the hole is mineralized, copper mineralized top to bottom, and the hole ends in copper mineralization. That would be a pretty sweetheart hole.
Right.
So we know that there's copper mineralization down to about 400 meters.
Uh-huh.
And if you use that far southeast Lepento model, it seems to fit fairly well there. And we've got that strike down to the Glenfiddich zone, to the Oban zone, which is about 1 kilometer. So somewhere in that high sulfidation veining and this breccia zone, we think if we just go down that system, we think that this is really the apex of a porphyry system at depth. How deep that is, we don't know. Maybe it's 1.5 kilometers. We have no idea. But if we can see significant copper mineralization towards the bottom of that hole, we're going to be pretty excited, I think.
Right. And in relation to the drilling costs at Atlan, what are the costs at Atlan per meter?
Well, we haven't drilled there yet, so ask me that question at the end of the season, and I'll have a better answer for you. But based on the fact that we're not using helicopters, and we know at Thorn we're in that sort of $400 to $500 a meter, because it's all largely air support, and so the fact that we're driving in Atlan, rig support should be relatively low. So our guess is in that sort of $200 a meter, maybe $225, $250. I don't know. We'll see as we work through a season of drilling there. Keep in mind we're doing a lot of non-drilling activities in Atlan, because there hasn't been surprisingly much soil geochem in the camp. Well, largely probably due to the high gravel in the low valleys, but so we're planning to do a fair amount of geochem, something like 5,000 soils. That should help flesh out some more targets, and boots on the ground, prospecting, geology, stuff like that. So that usually goes into your all-in cost anyways. But so yeah, we think we can get there relatively easy.
Okay. And the results from Thorn, when do you think they'll be due?
So I think the schedule of operations as we see it now, of course, is subject to change, but the plan is to get into Thorn early June, because the Oban is actually fairly low elevation target, fairly close to the camp. So that should be generally, even though we're going deep, perhaps lower cost than some of the other targets on the property, like Chivas is a little bit further away. So if we get in there in early June, depending on how the drilling goes, and if we can get down to the bottom and relatively, it should take 2 or 3 weeks to drill that hole, assuming we don't have any major challenges technically drilling it. We anticipate to get some results to market sometime in July.
Okay, great.
And then we're going to be having a bit of a crossover between the two projects. We think we can get in fact, the guys are building the camp, I believe now, starting in Atlin, and there's no snow there now, so fairly low elevation. So the thinking is to get in there and start doing some, I'll call it pre-drill workup and get ready for the drilling. So the idea is to get that deep hole at Oban Thorn done, and then shift over and start focusing on drilling and sort of mid to late June for Atlin.
Great, thanks. Looking forward to the results.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for your questions, David, and your participation. Greatly appreciated. Any other further questions, Campbell, have come in from your end? Marketing?
I guess what the history of the area going back the Atlin area, why did people kind of drift away? Is that the right word?
Yeah, I guess that would be the right word. Drift away. I mean, so as an example, well, if you know how the mining cycle goes, right? It's booms and busts and cycles. If you look at who did most of the work here, I would have to say Homestake Mineral Development Company were in there for a number of years in the late 80s and did good work, the work that they did. And of course, 1990 hit, the price of gold and silver tanked. For a decade there, you had a decade of low precious metal prices. So that's a good reason for people not to do much work into these kind of camps. So I think people were caught in these cycles of the mining camps. And you had, again, fragmented ownership. It's hard to do a property-wide systematic exploration program if you don't have a meaningful land position in the area. Well, that's part of the challenges, I think, here. My guess is it hasn't been easy. We know there's lots of drilling that was done, and we looked at some of the data, and it's just like, why were they drilling over there? We have no idea. Just people wildcatting holes. How hard can it be? Just go drill wherever, because there's gold coming out of all these drainages. There's got to be gold everywhere. So I think it's not an easy. Exploration in general is not an easy endeavor. So it has challenges, I guess, over time. And one of the mines that the zones that we're targeting is called the Imperial Mine. As far as we can see, they never even drilled it, and they pulled out 268 tons hand mined at a third of an ounce of gold. Never drilled a hole in this thing, and then of course moved on. I don't know, maybe got too deep, got some challenges. Who knows? Don't really know the reason, but that's going to be that's our challenge, is to try and figure it out and basically sort it out, right?
Thank you.
Okay, Gary, we're going to turn back to you for closing remarks.
Great. Well, look at everybody. I appreciate you guys taking the time to get the update on what we're doing. We're obviously excited to get the drills turning out on the property. So keep posted. We are planning to put out a bit of an update on kind of what we talked about here. We're still kind of waiting for a little bit of geochem work from MDRU on Thorn. So once we get that finalized, that'll help, I guess, put the finishing touches on our thinking at Thorn, and we're still kind of working through that. So keep posted on that. And I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a pleasant evening, and thanks again to Gary, and also to David Erfle for providing the introduction. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.